Great, welcome back. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these challenges should be nothing new to you, except for maybe that last one. Hopefully you still gave it a good go, but if you struggled, then let's find out how it could have been done. Right, so as we know, the main challenge was to create a public playlist of sounds that are chosen at random to play whenever a tank collects one of our power-ups. Now we should be pretty familiar with this object and the power-up audio script we've previously created for it. So as you can see, I've jumped straight into it. Now the first thing we'll need is a public array of the audio clip type. As we know, we can use this to store audio clips inside of and then trigger those later in one of our functions. So I'm going to start by writing public audio clip with 2 squared brackets after the type audio clip. And I'll call this array clips. This then completes step 1 of our 3-step process for using arrays, which we looked at in our arrays lesson. Step 2 is to initialize the array and give it a size. So let's set the array and write new audio clip with 2 more squared brackets, and now I just need to give it a size which will match the total amount of audio clips we wish to store inside of this array, which, including the new files I gave you to download for this challenge, gives us a total of 4. Great, so we have our array. Now it's currently empty at the moment, and I know that to reference audio clips with it, I need to jump back into Unity. But before I do that, I'm going to finish writing my script, as there's only one thing left to do, which is tell my audio source to use it to play an audio clip. Inside of the onTriggerEnter function, I can see that my script is using the play function to tell my source to play an audio clip. Now, if you completed this challenge successfully, then you probably replaced the play function with the play one-shot function in order to select a new audio clip each time the source is told to play. And if you did, great! That would have worked nicely and would definitely be the most optimal way of randomly triggering our clips. However, I am purposely not going to use the play one-shot function because I would like to show you a different way of switching between audio clips. Instead, I'm going to make some space in my script right before the play function is called. I'm then going to write source.clip. This property of the audio source class allows us to directly access the clip field on our audio source component in Unity, independently of the play one-shot function. Next, I just assign an audio clip to this property like I would if I were using the play one-shot function. So I'll write the name of my array and then select which audio clip I'm going to play by using the random.range function. So I'm going to write random.range. Now I have 4 audio clips I want to select from, so I want the random number chosen to range between 0 and 3. 0 will be the index for the first clip, 1 for the second, 2 for the third, and 3 for the fourth. So for the minimum, I can put 0. But I know that the maximum number I put will be excluded, as the random.range function for integers only looks for numbers lower than the maximum. So I have to go with one higher than 3 and put 4. Seeing as 4 is also the size or length of my array, I may as well use that as the maximum. This way, if I choose to increase the array size and add another clip to it, I won't have to come back here and manually increase the max number I've given to the range function. And that's everything that needs changing in the script. So next I need to add my clips to my array in the prefab of the power-up object. Okay, so I've saved my script and waited a bit to allow it to compile. I've also made my way to the power-up object prefab. Next I'm going to scroll down to my power-up audio component and click on the arrow next to clips, and I can now assign my audio clips to each new element. Okay, now that I've done that, the last thing left for me to do is to save the prefab and then jump into my game to test it. Great, so now I can drive around and find one of the power-up objects, and we hear one of our clips. Just to make sure that it is in fact randomly selecting clips, I'm going to drive into a few more. Great, that one sounds different to me. Let's do that one more time for good measure.
Great, the clip has changed again. So I'm now happy that my script is randomly playing audio clips. Okay, now it's time to move on to a bonus challenge. The first bonus challenge asks us to prevent the same audio clip from being played 2 times in a row. Now, seeing as we did this in lesson 4 of module 3, it shouldn't be too hard to do here. The first thing I'll need is a new integer variable, which is going to hold a value that will represent whatever index was last used in our array the last time our audio was triggered. I'll need my script to hold this value between frames, so it will have to be a global variable declared inside of my class. So underneath my other global variables, I will declare a private static integer called last index. I've made it a static variable because I want to keep track of the last index used between every instance of the power-up objects, as opposed to tracking its value individually for each instance. Next, I want another integer which will hold a random number to represent the index chosen. I'll only need this number for the frame that the power-up was collected and my sound will be played. So I'll make some room inside of the onTriggerEnter function for a local variable. I'll then declare this new integer and call it newIndex. To store a random number in this variable, I'll use the random.range function. I'm then going to set the minimum value to 0 and the max to the length of my array, just like I did last time. Next, I'll need to check that the random number chosen wasn't the same as last index, which later I'll set a value for. To do that, I'm going to use a while loop, so I can repeat the check multiple times in a single frame and keep re-randomizing until a different number is chosen. So I will write while with 2 brackets. The condition will see if newIndex is ever the same as last index. Now, if this condition is met, I'll re-randomize the value of newIndex. So underneath the condition and indented to the right slightly, I will copy and paste the line above. There we go, just like that. Okay, now that I have a random number, I just need to tell my audio source to select an audio clip from my array with an index that matches it. So I'm going to replace the random.range function that I've written inside of the squared brackets of my array and replace it with the newIndex variable. Nearly finished. The last thing I need to do now is give the last index variable the number chosen and held by the newIndex variable, so that the next time a power-up object is collected, my script will make sure that the sound played doesn't match the previous one. So after my play function, I'm going to set last index to the newIndex variable. And that's everything. If you've been following along with my method, give your script a save and test your game. But as for me, I'm going to move straight onto the second bonus challenge. Okay, now it's time to see if we can create a toggle that switches our script from playing our clips randomly to instead play them in order, starting with the first clip followed by the second, third, and fourth, and then back to the first again. First things first, I'll need a public Boolean variable to act as the toggle. So underneath my last variable, I'm going to declare a public bool and call it randomize clips. Next, I'm going to need an if statement. The if statement will check if the randomized clips bool is either true or false, and then change how the clips are played accordingly. So in between where I've modulated the pitch and where I've declared my new index variable, I'm going to make some space and create it. I'll then write if, followed by 2 brackets and 2 curly brackets underneath to create a body for it. Inside the brackets, I'll write the name of my Boolean variable, telling the if statement to check to see if it is ever true. Now, if it is true, I want my audio to be randomized. So what I need to do, therefore, is to take all of the code I've written so far in these challenges, as they're responsible for randomizing the clips, and then cut and paste them into the body of my if statement. So I will quickly do that now. Now I don't need to include the two lines above that are modulating the source's volume and pitch, as we only want the boolean to control how each clip is played, so they can stay where they are. Great, so now if the randomized clips boolean is true, my clips will be played randomly. But now I need to tell my script to play them sequentially if the boolean is false. How do I do that? Well, first I'm going to need to use an else statement in combination with my if statement. Now we looked at these briefly in the C# basics lesson of module 1. Using an else statement, we can give our script instructions to follow if the condition in the if statement is not met. So in other words, if the randomized clips boolean is false instead of true. So I'm going to write underneath my if statement else and give it a body. Okay, next I need to think about how I'm going to tell my script to play clips sequentially. Obviously, I'll need to tell them to play at some point, so I'll start by writing source.play one shot. Now that I've shown you how to use the clips property that belongs to the audio source class, I'm going to go back to using the play one shot function to select my clips, but either way will work. Next, I need to tell my function to play whichever clip comes after the clip that would have been played previously when a tank last collected a power-up. Thankfully, I already have a variable that tracks which clip index was last used, the last index variable. So using it, I need to tell my script to play the audio clip with an index of 1 greater than the last index. So just before my play one shot function, I'll simply add 1 to the last index variable. Because last index is now 1 index higher than what it was, I can use it to tell my function which clip to play. So inside of the brackets of play one shot, I will tell it to play a clip from my clips array and use last index to select the clip. Great! Now whenever a power up is collected, not only will the correct clip play for us, but by the end of the frame our last index variable will also have been updated. Let's walk ourselves through a quick scenario of how this could go to make sure nothing could go wrong here. Let's say the last index was 1 and randomized clips was set to false. Our tank would pick up a power up and last index would be increased to 2. Then the play one shot function would play a clip from the clips array with the index of 2. Then a few seconds later, another power-up is collected. Last index this time would be 2, so it would get increased by 1 and our function would play the clip with the index of 3. Then the play one shot function would play a clip from the clips array with the index of 2. Then a few seconds later, another power-up is collected. Last index this time would be 2, so it would get increased by 1 and our function would play the clip with the index of 3. So far, so good. Next, the third power-up is collected. Last index was 3, so now it gets increased to 4. But hold on a second, we only have 4 clips to play. The highest index we want to go to, therefore, is 3. If we try to tell our function to play a clip with an index of 4, Unity will give us an error because our script won't be able to find anything. So we need a way, therefore, to detect when last index is at 3, and when it is, setting it back down to 0 instead of increasing it to 4 so our sequence can start from the beginning. To do this, I'm going to create another if statement. This time it's going to be inside of my else statement before I increase last index by 1. This statement is going to check to see if last index is ever equal to 3, but I'm not going to write that exactly. I'm going to write if last index is the same as the length of the clips array minus 1. I'm using the length here for the same reason we've been using it as the maximum number in our random.range functions. If we ever decide to add or remove clips from our array, our script will still work. And of course, the length is 4, not 3, so I also have to specifically tell the if statement to check to see if last index is equal to the length minus 1. Next, what am I going to do if my script detects that last index is in fact 3? Well, because this would mean that the last clip played was our 4th clip, we want the next one played to be our 1st, which has an index of 0. Now we can't just set last index to 0 because it will immediately be increased by 1. So instead we need to anticipate this and set last index to -1 instead.
So now, whenever a power-up is collected and the last clip that played was our 4th, our script will check to see if last index is equal to 3. Of course it is, so we then reset it to -1. Our script then immediately adds 1 to it, making it 0, and finally plays the first clip in our array. We can also apply this logic to the very first time a power-up is collected. Because we never instantiated last index when we declared it, we know it's going to start at 0. This means that the first clip to be played will be our second, index number 1, because our script is going to add 1 to the last index before using it to select a clip. So to fix this, we can set last index to -1. So it is instead increased to 0, and our first audio clip is played first. And don't worry about this negatively affecting our script if we choose to randomize the clips instead, because the value of -1 will be overwritten by whatever random number is assigned to the new index after a random clip is played. And that's everything I need to do. To test that they will play in sequence when randomized clips is false, I'm going to quickly add debug.log to show me what clip has been chosen to play. And there we go. So it's time for me to save my script and jump into Unity. Okay, so here you can see I have the power-up object prefab open. This is so I can show you that I've left randomized clips as false to test them playing in sequence. Okay, so now I'll play my game. Okay, so what I'm going to do is drive the blue tank around and collect all of the power-ups I can find and watch my console, as I should see them go in order from the first clip to the second to the third and so on. Great, so the first one played collect power-up. There you go, you can see the second played collect power-up too. There's clip 3. And clip 4. Now hopefully the next one I collect should play the collect power up clip again. Brilliant, and it did just as we expected it to. So now that we've got our power-ups playing random clips with random volume and random pitch, feel free to get creative with them. If you haven't already, feel free to play your game and tweak the settings we created for the pitch and volume modulation, so that things sound a little less messy than how my game currently is. You can then also decide if you prefer to hear the clips in sequence or randomized, whichever you think suits the game best. And that's everything for Module 3's challenge. So how did you do? There were obviously less bonus challenges here than last time, but I'm hoping you found that the ones I did include tested your understanding of the topics we covered in this module. With that though, I'd say we've spent enough time with the power-ups and the tanks shooting. So in the next module, we're really going to mix things up with various topics and techniques to build your Unity confidence even further. Take a well-earned breather after all of that, and I'll see you over there.